Just this one table asks the question, does the government want the private sector to take over our schools? And the flip side of that is, does the private sector want to take over our schools? And I think it's pretty much one of the basic core questions in this whole exercise. And I just reflected on two quotes we picked up from Treasury back in September 2011, when one quote was from a Treasury aide to the Minister of Finance. In the attached Treasury narrative, we've reflected yours, that's Bill English's, interest in competition being used to maintain competitive tension both within the state system, that's between state schools, and as a catalyst to innovate the state system itself via non-state alternative schooling models providing choice. So that's Bill English's narrative that's going on in his head. Treasury responded to that in a report in 2011 called Increasing the Use of the Private Sector in Schooling. They said it's important to distinguish between the two objectives of choice outlined: using choice to encourage diversity of provision as an end in itself versus using choice to encourage competition amongst similar providers as a means to improve quality. So that's the sort of debate that's being played out. They do go on to say, though, however, we do not recommend relying on competition for students as a key mechanism for raising student achievement. Systems that do create a more competitive environment in which many schools compete for students do not systematically produce better PISA scores. Competitive environments are characterised by policies such as abolishing enrolment zones, introducing voucher schemes, and using charter schools. So, what is the government trying to do here? And my argument is it's actually trying to create a playing field where it does create that competition, even though the Treasury advice, interestingly enough, was to the contrary with it. And then fundamentally, this government will believe that the private sector will carve off those pieces that are most profitable, as Maury talked about this morning, and leave the rest to us. That's fundamentally where that's going. Just quickly, some other points. One group about school sponsorship. And I doubt that there was a school here that did not have some level of sponsorship. So what do we do about sponsorship in schools? Where do we draw that line? And what happens to that sponsorship when it goes down the road to the next school? And every little step on sponsorship makes it easier to take the next step, and the next step, and the next step. So where do we draw the line on that? A couple of other groups were interested in the response, and they wanted more information put out there, particularly around Pearson and what Pearson are doing, not just in the materials area, but in the whole policy area which they're now engaged in New Zealand education. And John has done that research he mentioned earlier for us. Now it's 200 pages long, so we will actually download the main points he says in this to give you accessible information about what you can actually do on the ground about the sort of institutions he's talked about, and not just Pearson, but also the cause and the cognitions and all these other guys that feed off the sector and feed around the sector. So you will get that information, and you'll be able to use that inside your schools to make some informed choices about how much you want your school to buy into a global agenda around commercialisation and privatisation. Thank you.